What the thing that's made your life feel harder than everyone else's is actually the thing that makes you extraordinary. Here's what almost nobody talks about. The most genuinely gifted people walking around right now, in offices, in classrooms, in quiet apartments at 2 a.m., most of them have no idea what they actually are. Not because they lack self-awareness, but because giftedness rarely looks the way we were told it would. It doesn't always show up as straight A's or standing ovations. Sometimes it shows up as exhaustion, as overthinking, as feeling like you simply don't belong anywhere you've ever been. And if that lands somewhere familiar, stay with this. Because these next few minutes might be the first time something finally makes sense. Today we're looking at 10 signs that point to genuine psychological giftedness. Not IQ numbers, not test results, the real patterns. The ones that live quietly inside everyday behavior, hiding in plain sight for years, sometimes decades. These aren't flattering checkboxes. They're honest signals, backed by research. And for a lot of people, they're the explanation they never received. Let's get into it. Not just emotions. Everything. A film score that makes the room feel different. A conversation that replays in your head 3 days later. An idea that shows up at midnight and refuses to leave until you've turned it over completely. Developmental psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski spent years studying this phenomenon in gifted individuals. He called it psychic overexcitability, a state where the nervous system doesn't just receive experience, it amplifies it. For most people, a sunset is a sunset. For you, it's almost too much to look at. That's not drama. That's neurology. Ever since you can remember, because that's just how it works, has never been enough. You needed the why, behind the why. As a kid, this probably annoyed people around you. As an adult, it's made you unusually good at seeing through things others take at face value. Cognitive researchers describe this as a drive toward epistemic depth, a refusal to settle for incomplete understanding. Most people hear an explanation and move on. You hear an explanation and immediately ask what's underneath it. That's not stubbornness. That's a mind that refuses to be lazy. Not the loneliness of being alone. The loneliness of being in a crowded room and still feeling like you're on the outside of something. Researchers at the Gifted Development Center have documented this consistently. Gifted individuals frequently report a quiet but persistent sense of social disconnection. Not because they dislike people, but because the conversations they crave rarely seem to happen naturally. You've probably learned to adapt, to meet people where they are, to adjust your frequency. But that adjustment has a cost, and most people never name what that cost actually is. You finish something. Others say it's impressive. And your immediate honest reaction is, yeah, but I know exactly where it broke down. This isn't low confidence. It's what happens when your ability to evaluate your own work is significantly ahead of your ability to produce it. Researchers call this a metacognitive gap, and it runs especially deep in gifted individuals. Your internal benchmark is set by your mind at its very best, which means average output, even objectively good output, never feels like enough. That internal pressure has probably driven you to produce remarkable things. It's also probably kept you up at night more times than you can count. Maybe it was a classroom where asking too many questions felt dangerous. Maybe it was a friendship group where enthusiasm got you labeled as too much. Whatever the environment, you figured out the rules quickly, and you adjusted. Psychologists who study gifted development call this intellectual masking. A learned pattern where someone deliberately dims their own curiosity, slows their processing speed in conversations, and holds back contributions they already know are right. The problem is that over time, the mask and the face start to blur, and many gifted adults spend years genuinely unsure of what they're actually capable of, because they stopped showing up fully so long ago. A documentary you watched 3 years ago suddenly explains something happening in your personal life right now. A pattern in one field solves a problem in a completely different one. You get to conclusions through routes that are almost impossible to retrace. This is called integrative complexity, and neurological studies have found that highly gifted individuals show measurably greater connectivity between brain regions that don't typically interact. Your brain doesn't think in straight lines. It thinks in constellations. And what looks like a random leap to someone else is actually the result of your mind doing something extraordinary underneath the surface. Most people see something unfair, feel a flicker of discomfort, and move on. You don't move on that easily. Gifted individuals consistently demonstrate what researchers call heightened moral sensitivity, a deeply wired reaction to inequality, dishonesty, and situations where people are treated as less than they are. This isn't idealism. This is your nervous system flagging something as genuinely wrong, the same way it would flag physical pain. It makes certain environments nearly unbearable. It also makes you the kind of person who notices what everyone else quietly decides to ignore. This goes beyond restlessness. When your mind isn't adequately engaged, it doesn't quietly wait. It generates its own stimulation, through worst-case scenarios, through elaborate daydreams, through mental loops that have nowhere useful to go. Neuroscientists link this to a lower threshold for understimulation in individuals with highly active prefrontal cortex functioning. Your brain needs more input to feel regulated. And when the world doesn't provide it, your mind goes looking, sometimes in directions that look, from the outside, like anxiety or distraction. But it isn't either of those things. It's a powerful engine sitting in neutral, straining for something worth doing. And part of you has wondered if they were right. They weren't. Research into high emotional sensitivity, including work by psychologist Elaine Aron, consistently overlaps with what we find in gifted populations. Deeper emotional processing, longer recovery from difficult experiences, a richer, more complex inner life than most people around you seem to have. Your amygdala, the brain's emotional core, isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning at a level most people never reach. You don't feel things more deeply because something is wrong with you. You feel things more deeply because your brain was built to experience the world without the filters most people rely on. That's not fragility. That's a form of profound aliveness. The praise lands. You nod. And somewhere underneath, a quiet voice says they don't know the full picture. This is imposter phenomenon. And while it touches many people, it runs unusually deep in gifted individuals. For a specific reason. The greater your awareness, the more clearly you see the distance between where you are and where you sense you could be. Your mind is always reaching further than your current position, which means arrival, that feeling of I've actually made it, is almost structurally impossible. Not because you're failing, because your standard moves every time you get close to it. So here's what ties all 10 of these together. Giftedness, in the real psychological sense, is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about processing the world at a different depth, with more intensity, more complexity, more weight. And because none of that looks like a gift from the inside, because it mostly feels like a burden, most gifted people never fully understand what they're actually working with. If several of these signs didn't just resonate, but genuinely recognize something in you, something you've carried for a long time without a name for it, then maybe the most useful thing here isn't a label. It's this. You were never too much. You were never broken. You were operating on a different level, in a world that didn't always know what to do with that. And understanding that, really sitting with it, that's where things can start to shift. If this opens something up for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper, subscribe, because this channel is built exactly for minds like yours. The next video? It's going to challenge something you've probably believed about yourself for years. You won't want to miss it.